What you find with drowning victims is they'll always grab something. So you sometimes find them with their glasses in their hand, or they got what they call a death grip. It's quite horrific, actually, because most drowning victims are staring at you. They're not. They don't shut their eyes. They tend to have their eyes open and they'll be gripping something. Well, I grew up in Reigate in Surrey, started life in a two-bedroom council flat in Bats Hill when I was born. I lived there until I was about 5. My dad was a king caver, and a king caver in the military as well. He used to go around the country, and he used to have all these old acetylene lamps on the staircase. And one day Dad come home and he said, I've got to go and cover it. Dad worked for the local newspaper. I'm going up the caves, you can't come with me, but I'm going to cover this story. And they found a local gentleman called Dennis Mustoe rediscovered the mines that dated back to the 11th century. And then after a few weeks, Dad said, do you mind if I bring my nipper along? And he said, well, how old is he? He said, well, he's 5 years old. He said, 5 years old, taking him down? He said, no, he's fine, he's a good kid. So Dad got me my own helmet, and I started going down the mines, and then they were using me like a tunnel rat, because we would dig through roof collapses where it collapsed, tiny little wormholes going in, so small, to try and break through into the next section of passage. Nowadays, you can imagine the health and safety nightmare teachers, you can't do that. But I had a great life, and I did that, right up until I was in my 20s, really.
You end up working in the local caves. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into that?
I went to college. I went to the Industrial Training Centre. So I had a trade, but I always wanted to continue going down the mines in the background. As we carried on, the scout groups used to go down there, and as the mine got bigger, the scout groups and then they would start getting lost down there. So I got contacted by Surrey Fire and Rescue Service, Surrey Fire Brigade as it was then, and I became their scout, so their lead, because they didn't know their way through the mine. So I would then get called by them to then lead the fire brigade through. And I remember my first job, they gave me a pager and it went off at like 2 a.m, and I turned up with sort of 5-6 fire engines. There was a special rescue units, ambulances everywhere, and all it was a bunch of lost scouts. They went down at 3, and this was now midnight, and no one reported where they were. When we got there, their torches had all gone out. The scout leader was literally crying on the floor, and he said he could see monsters coming out the wall. I mean, when I say dark, if you go into a cave or a mine and you turn your light out, there's nothing. You can't see anything. It's just wave your hand, and it's quite a scary thought. And all you hear are drips of water, land coming from the ceiling. It's quite spooky if you're not used to it. We lived in this flat, and I had one little girl at the time, and my wife Mandy was in this flat. I used to write in the corner, and I'm in there, I'm getting bored, I think. And then the phone rang one day, and she said she used to answer it, Specialist Rescue International. Now, that's what I started my company, and I used to get laughed at by people. Go, who do you think you are? And I was just this guy called myself. It sounded big. And he said, could I speak to Peter? And she said, yeah, hold the line. And she's got a baby crying in one hand, and she's trying to muffle it, went in the other room. And he said, my name's Mervyn Edwards. He said, I've got a problem. You've done some training down at Netley in Hampshire for the police a few weeks ago, and we've got a problem at the Newbury bypass. And he said, look, there's a big briefing tomorrow. I need you to turn up, and I think you can help us. Now, they had what I didn't realise the extent, because I wasn't watching a lot of TV, I wasn't reading a lot of the newspapers. And then I arrived at Cheveley Services. I'd been military, and I polished all my shoes up. I was immaculate. I had a hole in the bottom of my shoe because I didn't have any money. And I just had to put a bit of cardboard in the bottom to stop my feet touching the ground. It was a little hole in the bottom. And I walked into this meeting, and then Mervyn said, you're going to meet some serious players in a minute. The under-sheriff, the Treasury solicitor, they're all going to be in there, and you're going to be the one who solves the problems for them. And I said, right, okay, we got lots of protesters who need digging out. And he said, the bailiffs can't do it, police can't go down tunnels, so I need you to do it.
So what were the people down there protesting for, and why were they in that specific part of?
They were protesting against it was the big roads building schemes in the 90s. So from sort of 1995 up to about 2001, there was the big anti-roads protest. You had Twyford Down, you had all that, which I wasn't involved in, then Newbury Bypass, but this was the first time they dug some tunnels on the M11 briefly, but they weren't tunnels, they were just under the floors. This was the first time they had actually excavated tunnels to avoid eviction. And then that's where the infamous Swampy was dug in, the big Swampy, and Dan Hooper.
And who was Swampy, sorry?
Swampy, Daniel Hooper, he was an anti-roads protester. He made his name, and he's actually a nice fella, really nice guy. And we spent many hours, obviously 9 days with him down a tunnel trying to dig him out. It was hard work. I mean, we're looking 12 hours a day down a tunnel covered in dust and muck. And we eventually got to Dan Hooper. He was behind a door, and we just chit-chatted. And we'd give him a coffee. You sort of break the ice with him because you want violence against you, and he wasn't violent. But one girl called Eleanor, she bit one of my colleagues. She bit him, which was a bit grim. But yeah, it was like a game of cat and mouse down the tunnels, and obviously that was very lucrative for us because it was dangerous work. Nobody else could do it. It was really dangerous work, and we went on for years doing it. We carried on doing all the protests, but then someone said, I suggest you look at diving operations and maritime type protests. We've got a fleet of boats. We bought boats because we were dealing with Greenpeace in the sea as well. And I went off to America, and I looked at the way I wanted to find people. How do we, over here we have a police underwater search unit. Sadly, there's only about 10 left in the UK now through budget cuts. And to find a human being in water, it's very difficult because diving, you can only cover X amount a day, and obviously I'm a diver as well. So I wanted technology, and the Americans were leading the field in this technology. So I went out to America, worked with a company called Marine Sonic, and I brought back Marine Sonic technology, side scan sonar, got the product training on it. Then I started doing 3 years of trials with the National Search Advisor, Professor Mark Harrison, who was the National Police Search Advisor. So me and Mark worked together, and it was my time. I'd invite Mark, we'd throw a dummy into a lake, and I would sonar and then show Mark the results, and then I got put on the expert database. My first drowning I dealt with was a lad who drowned in a water ski lake in Cambridgeshire. And that was tough. Sonar doesn't work through weed or reeds, so you've got to put a diver in. Funny enough, we were towing the sonar, trying to get an image, and as we towed the thing, we dislodged the body, and he popped up. He was there amongst the weed, and then there was this guy completely covered in weed. And then you see his hands were gripping the weed where he would drowned. And what you find with drowning victims is they'll always grab something. So you sometimes find them with their glasses in their hand, or they got what they call a death grip. It's quite horrific actually, because most drowning victims are staring at you. They're not, they don't shut their eyes. They tend to have their eyes open and they'll be gripping something. And that was my first shock of dealing with a drowning victim. But I was then determined to actually make this technology work and find people and evidence. And then I ended up going on to do some obviously huge cases for that.
So when you're starting out, what kind of cases are you dealing with? Who are you looking for in the water?
Mark was the National Search Advisor, so he started bringing me into murder and missing person cases. That was in water, evidence, knives. He called me one day, so I got some very confidential documents to send you. Now, because I was doing government work, I had encrypted computers, and I was very trusted, and I had the necessary clearances. So he sent me this confidential document, and it was all about Peter Tobin. And it was being done by Operation Anagram. And then I worked on an operation called Mahogany. So what had happened years earlier, two little girls had been sexually assaulted in a house on the south coast in South Sea. Tobin was living there. He tied them up, turned the gas taps on. In the old days, we had gas coming into the old stoves. and hopefully the house would explode and they would die. They got away. He got jailed. I think he got 14 years, done 10 years or 12 years, got released, went to Scotland, changed his name, got a job as a handyman in the church in the name of Pat McLaughlin. And then he basically went on to make friends with a girl there called Angelica Kluke, who was a tea girl, and unfortunately, sadly, raped her one day and multiple stabbed her and put her under the floor. He then went on the run. Tobin got apprehended. David Swindle and his team, Superintendent David Swindle, put anagram together. They then started looking, once they arrested him, where did Tobin live before? Because there was unsolved ones. The murder of Vicky Hamilton. They never found Vicky Hamilton. She disappeared in Bathgate. They then tracked that Tobin lived in a house in Bathgate around the corner from where Vicky went missing. So then I was tasked by Mark to do the full forensic search with my team of the house. Aidan and Robin were in the loft searching, and they found the dagger. They found a dagger hidden in the rafters. Got that fastball to forensic lab, and that contained the DNA of Vicky Hamilton. That piece of evidence then secured the conviction of Vicky Hamilton, Tobin, for the murder of Vicky Hamilton. Then at that time we then got fastball. It was then we got another house of Tobin that he shared in Portsmouth, where I went down, done a full forensic search of that. Lucy Syburn, the archaeologist, and her team, Kent Police, Lothian and Borders Police were running Mahogany, went into Margate, and that's where they found Dinah Nicole and Vicky Hamilton encased in concrete in the back garden. Evil man.
How do you feel to be part of these big investigations where you do catch serial killers?
It was huge. You're working as a team. It's not about us. It's not about me. It's a team effort. A lot of detectives working on it, and there was us, and there was forensic archaeologists, the sniffer dogs. There's so many people involved, and it is all about a team. And what the importance of any police investigation is, you bring the right resources in at the time with all the right technology. That's where it's so important if you're going to solve a crime.
And tell me a little bit about when you're going into water to search for bodies. Are you often finding the body intact? What's it like when you're going in? What are you expecting as you go into the water? If
they've just drowned, then we find them very quickly. So on average in the southeast, we deal with about 10 drownings a year. It's been very quiet this year, which has been a good thing. In 2016, we recovered 16 drowning victims in 8 weeks. It was a hot summer, pretty horrendous. But what we do initially, because we got this specialist sonar equipment, it will image the seabed. I can see everything on the seabed or the riverbed, and I can trawl over it. And as soon as I get a signature of a body, I'll see the body, and I can use the software to measure my target, so I can measure the length of the body. And then you'll see me put a float in, and then my dive team, one of us will dive. We'll have a standby diver on the surface, and then we'll put what they call a jackstay across the river, or we'll have a fan search. So we'll put the diver on a line. Again, we're commercial divers, and the diver will swim from side to side on an arc search, and he will then be let out a metre, and he will go that way, and then another metre out, and he would arc, and then eventually you just put your hand on the body, and then you put them under your arm, normally secure them with a line around you, and then you signal to the shore on the radio or rope pulls, and then they help you in with a body under your arm. You normally keep them under the water, put them in a body bag. If you're looking for a knife, it's fingertip searching or using metal detectors. But with a line, you're just feeling around, and suddenly you'll put your arm on their shoulder or their head. And that's it. It's not a nice feeling, to be honest with you. You just have to do, that's what you do as a job. And you just recover them, and you do it in the most dignified manner as you can. The bit I find tough, if I'm honest, is dealing with the family, because I often have to be, I'm there, the families are there, and because I'm the one who's leading my team, I'm often the one who then goes and delivers the message to the family. And I remember going to one lad who his son was in fishing with him, and he fell over the back of a boat. And his son was left floating around in the middle of the river. And I talked to his son, say, "Where's Daddy gone?" And he's pointed the rough area. We recovered him, and I went over to before we recovered him, I found him on sonar, and went to the mum and the wife, and I walked across. So I got some really bad news, unfortunately. We think we found him and they both collapsed in front of me. And I literally had tears running down my eyes. And I had to turn around and just walk off into the distance and sort of compose myself. It's very, very difficult dealing with that situation. It's not nice, but people have to deal with it, same as police, firefighters, emergency service. And that's the bit you don't see every day, where people will deal with trauma.
And what state are the bodies that you find normally in? What happens to a body when it's been in water for days, weeks?
Well, it's interesting because, again, a body. We had one in Thames Valley area where it was 3 months and you wouldn't want to see it. It was horrendous. We had to be decontaminated afterwards.
Really, why?
Well, they bloat. They bloat up double size. It's like a bloated seal, and that it's not nice. So a body when you drowned, you go straight to the bottom. You don't float like you see in the movies, flying down the river, being shot, and they all float down the river because there's no air in the lungs. So if you imagine laying in a swimming pool, you breathe in and breathe out. If you breathe out very hard, you expel all the air and you sink to the bottom, and that's what basically happens to a body. And then after a few days, by microbiological action, it's not my field, but you start to rot from the inside out. And then the skin starts to change to a mauve colour, and it goes white and then mauve, and it's not very pleasant. And then as you then start to bloat, so the body gets bigger. And then as that happens, then the body will float to the surface. But there's no exact science on this. So this could be a week, it could be 10 days, it could be 3 months like we had in Thames Valley. There's no science on it. So everybody's makeup is different. So you could be on the bottom for 20 days and you won't come up. And again, it depends on water temperature. That can make a big difference as well. So it really depends on what what the person is. So or what clothing they're wearing at the same time.
And why do you love the work that you do, Peter? What is it that keeps you doing this important work?
I love doing it because I bring closure. We bring closure. My team and I, we bring closure, and our heart's in the right place. We're not there. We just want to do good for people, and if we can do that, then we will, and we get good results. I mean, the amount of drowning victims, I'm still in contact with certain people, and there was one case called Ellis Downs who drowned. Ellis fell in the river in Abingdon. He was swimming across a river on a hot, I think it was an April day now, I think it was 2016, and he went in the river, he swam across, and his friend said, "Stay there, Ellis, don't come back." Because the cold water saps your energy. And he said, "No, I'm going to come back." And he swam back halfway across the river and sadly lost his life. So we put the sonar in, got a location, we then put a diver in. Within a very short time, Ellis's body was recovered in exactly the same place as he went down. Ellis was 16, and I still get a message from Darren Downs every year on the anniversary of Ellis going missing, which is really touching, to say thank you for recovering my son. We owe you so much. That's all it is.
There was pots and pans on the top of the cooker, and you kind of think to yourself, they just haven't done their washing up. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But then when you looked at the material in the frying pan, it was like, wow, that doesn't look like normal food, And anyway, it turned out that it was brain.